that unite us. We also need basin-wide consistent laws, regulations, and definitions to protect and expand the existing public trust laws, and we must demand eventually the supremacy of this framework over the existing failing one. And if you think this is terribly novel, it is to an extent, but it is being tried in Europe, where in 2000 they came up with a watershed agreement that, because all of their watersheds cross political boundaries, often 2 or 3 or 4 countries, that they would start governance of these watersheds by watershed region, not by national governance. And it's not without its problems, but it is an exciting experiment nonetheless. So I dream of a Great Lakes Basin watershed plan that would encompass watershed-wide planning and management, where we could come to common rules, common to the whole basin, on toxic dumping, on sewage waste, on sustainable food production. A lot of the problems that we have is that we are not only using unsustainable chemicals and nitrates and so on, and pesticides that then run into the lake when it rains, but we're also taking Great Lakes water and shipping it out of the region in the form of virtual water exports when we think of big agribusiness as opposed to sustainable food production. We would come to common agreement on groundwater mapping and protection, common plans to fight invasive species. And I want a plan that would include basin-wide bans on bunker oil, nuclear shipment, tar sands pipelines, fracking, water exports, including for bottled water, and ocean-going vessel access to the Great Lakes. And I think we should demand more. There's no question that this is going to demand the cooperation of many levels of government. And people say to me, "You're crazy. If they won't give this authority to the International Joint Commission, what are you talking about?" And I'm reminded of how much sovereignty Canada gives up in these trade agreements like NAFTA and the upcoming CETA, Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement with Europe, where for the first time they'll be able to challenge spending at schools, hospitals, water systems. The 2 biggest private water utilities in the world are European and chomping at the bit for this because they want to come in and run Canada's water systems on a for-profit basis, and the Harper government is just paving the way for this to happen. If countries can give away so-called sovereignty to make their big business community happy, surely to God we could come together and come up with common rules and common protections and common public trust law to save the Great Lakes in North America. Surely we can do that. So just in closing, I want to say that I believe there's a growing goodwill to move to a new consciousness to save our Great Lakes. I can't tell you how many people say to me, "I want to do something. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to open the door. I'm not an expert. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an elected official. I don't know what to do." Well, here's what I think we need to do. We would love to see this as a full treaty one day, but our starting point is not with governments. Our starting point is in the cities, towns, villages, hamlets, and farms that ring the Great Lakes and the people who live on them and love them. And the purpose of this tour and the community and the campaign is to get communities around the lakes, as well as existing community and environmental groups, to come together through this narrative of the commons. In other words, don't stop fighting for the cleanup of Hamilton Harbor or the toxics. And I understand there's talk of a free trade zone at the airport as well. So this is going to, where they're going to encircle a bunch of remove farmland, active farmland. So I mean, there's even a second political agenda around, as I understand it, around what you're dealing with, Linda, at the airport. But so nobody's saying stop doing this wonderful work. It's incredibly necessary, but can we see it as part of a larger framework, as part of something that you're doing your part, somebody else is doing their part, but together we're working towards something that's a common goal. And we want to strengthen people's cultural and visceral connection to the lakes, and we want to promote what I call the right to care. I have a friend who uses the term the right not to know, which I think is gorgeous. I am rich, I am, privileged, I am whatever. Therefore, I don't need to know what it's like to live in poverty, and I don't need to know what it's like not to be of the dominant group or whatever. I don't have to know, because I can excuse myself from that knowledge. I think it's a wonderful concept that we have to challenge, and I keep thinking, well, what's the alternative to the right not to know? It's not just the right to know, it's the right to care. And it's the responsibility to care, that we absolutely have to, as citizens, as humans, as the people occupying this place now for future generations, we absolutely have to care. We need to build on the great work of countless national, state, provincial, community, and First Nations groups that have toiled for decades to protect this jewel in our midst. One of the things that we're talking about, starting with and talking and working with Mark and others, is to start with this Great Lakes Protection Act, which the Ontario government promised during the election campaign, but which is timid, and looking at the first steps look timid. Also, the money that they talked about going with it seems to have dropped off at the side of the language. But we think it would be a good start to really say to the McGuinty government, we want this to be strong, and we want it to be visionary, and we don't just want you to plod along. We want something that has meaning and speaks to people's hearts and souls, because we need to feel this ownership, but we need you to understand that we feel it too. We have to commit to forge together a participatory process commensurate to the challenges of these mighty lakes and the communities, First Nations, and habitat that depend on them. The Great Lakes need great friends. In the end, we are their hope for survival. Thank you so much.